The Deere Agency specializes in helping you understand your coverage before you need it. We offer all lines of personal and commercial insurance, including auto, home, and life. Contact Don Deere at 210-507-2169 and visit us at 7529 North Loop 1604 in Live Oak, Texas, or farmersagent.com/ddeere.
Are you pregnant and alone? You have options. The Sanctuary of Hope offers expectant mothers ages 12 to 22 a place to live, medical care, counseling, continued education, and options to raise your baby in a loving environment or help you with adoption. We want to help provide you and your baby with a bright future. Call us or email us today and let's walk through this together. 210-499-1554 or sohcares.org. All inquiries are confidential.
I Am Refocused Radio is brought to you by Documation, service that serves. Technology solutions to keep you moving forward. Visit nation.com today. You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shemaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shemaya Reed.
Welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here today with a special guest. We are going to talk to Arthur Stewart, former Motown producer, and this is going to be an amazing story. So sit back and relax and listen up. So first and foremost, I want to welcome Arthur Stewart to the show today and say, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fine, Shemaya, and thank you for the invite. It is my pleasure, sir, to chat with you concerning my career and my life at Motown and any other thing you want to chat about.
First and foremost, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
All righty, I'll make it brief. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee in 1939. Moved to Detroit in 1950. Went to Detroit Public Schools, and from there I went into the service, came out, went to Motown in 1968 as a trainee. I started off in Motown as a trainee. From Motown, I went to NBC, and from NBC back to Motown, from Motown back to NBC, where I retired. That's briefly and quick and succinct as I can make it.
This is amazing. I'm almost getting goosebumps listening to this right now. So 1968.
Yes.
Amazing time to be in. Yes. Because you started a journey that I would say is very powerful, and it made history, to say the least.
Yes.
So tell the audience what happened in 1968.
Well, in 1968, to start my career, my wife was married to the director of engineers at Motown. His name was Calvin Harris. Calvin is now deceased. But Calvin Harris was a young man that came to visit me, and Motown wasn't far from where my wife and I lived at the time. And since he was the director of engineers, he asked me if I wanted to go up and see how, Motown worked. There wasn't no one there, but he would play some music for me, and I agreed to that. I told him, yeah. So when I got there, and he showed me what his job entailed and what the job of an engineer entailed and the producers and so forth, I asked him straight up that if Motown ever had an opening or any type of way for me to get in, I would love to get into Motown and start working at Motown, because I enjoyed what he was explaining to me and how he explained it to me. The joy of being able to be around music and to help put it together. So that, in a brief, succinct tale again, is my career at Motown, and my start in 1968. Now, it took about 2 months, and Carol Harris called me and said, hey, Art, Motown is going to start a training program. And this program would be the first training program that Motown had ever endeavored to do. And so he said, we want to try to train our own engineers, because what they had found out was that when they hired engineers from other record companies, they didn't quite have what Barry was looking for, what the owner of Motown, Barry Gordy, was looking for, or those who were in charge. And so they decided to undertake a training program. And by the way, they only did one. Fortunately, I got in. And when I got in to Motown, it was an amazing thing to happen to me, although I'll tell you another little side bit here. At the time, I was working for General Motors, Cadillac Motors in Detroit. And Motown wasn't paying as much as General Motors. And when I explained to my lovely wife, whom I've been married to, will be 56 years, July the 7th this year, that I was going to take a job at Motown and earn less, she thought I had lost my friggin' mind. how could you dare do that? You got a family now. You can't. It was just something that I wanted to do and something that I believe would work. And praise be to God, it did work. The rest is history, which I'll explain if you want me to.
When you got into the program, that was the first year, no pressure. What was some of the expectations when you were in training mode? Like, what were some of the activities that they were actually having you do?
Okay, now, to give your audience an idea, things are not done the same way today because everything is computerized and in that form and that fashion. At the time, we had actual microphones, actual boards that we operated, big boards that operated the sound that came through. So what you would do, my job, my training was to supply Motown engineers with whatever tools they needed. For example, in order to record, you needed the recording tape. And in order to hear, you had to have microphones hooked up. They trained me as to how to set the microphones for drums, for pianos or guitars or whatever instruments was being used to create this music. I had to learn how to position these microphones in the proper place at the request of the head engineer who I was being trained for. And my job was to go to the library in the morning to get the tapes that they were going to use for a particular session, as we called it, where artists would come in or musicians would come in and record. That was a recording session. After learning how to do that, I finally got an opportunity to actually come inside the control room and fool around with the buttons and knobs on the recording board. And they began to train me as to how to utilize that part of the facility to get a record to tape and then to disc. And it was quite an interesting experience for me, being new at the game of recording and making records for record companies. It was exciting, and it was very rewarding for me. And eventually, my wife had to admit that I made the right move. Because when I bought her first Mercedes, she said, "Woo." And I bought that. I was able to do that because of the success I had at Motown, Shemaiah.
And when you were making that progress, what was the breaking point where you had your great opportunity? How did that happen?
You know what? There were a lot of things along the way, but the most significant part of my life was my being introduced to Marvin Gaye. Now, I met Marvin Gaye in California. Barry Gordy moved the operation of Motown from Detroit to Los Angeles, California. In the interim, I had left Motown because of a minor dispute about salary and went to California with 3 other engineers. And that's where NBC came in when I mentioned earlier in my statement that Motown, NBC, that was the history of the last part of my life. So I went to NBC, started doing freelance work for NBC News, that is, and doing audio for them behind the cameraman. I was the audio guy. So at any rate, what happened, a couple of the engineers that I went to California with, one by the name of Larry Mouse, went back to Motown. And after a short period of time, he told me that Motown was in need of engineers and what I consider coming back to Motown, because at the time I was freelancing with NBC News and other news organizations in Los Angeles. And I decided, okay, I'll come back if they are willing to be fair with me as far as the pay was concerned, because that was the reason I left Motown. It was about the pay situation. So when I spoke to the person who interviewed me, and he asked me what did I need to become another employee of Motown, I gave him a figure, and he agreed to it. And so that's how I ended up back at Motown. And from there was where I met Marvin Gaye. And before I met Marvin Gaye, now I've worked with a lot of other people, but Marvin Gaye was instrumental into the question that you asked me, into me jumping my career, leapfrogging to where it is, where it ended up. Marvin Gaye and I began to work together. And for some reason, he had a respect for the way that I worked and my knowledge of that I'd acquired concerning recording. And we formed a bond of friendship and trust. Marvin Gaye, I'd worked on Marvin on an album called Trouble Man, which was a soundtrack to the movie Trouble Man. From that, I did work with him on Let's Get It On album. After Let's Get It On, I worked with Marvin on the Hear My Dear album, which was, for your audience, the Hear My Dear album was a form of payment to Marvin's wife. They were being divorced at the time. They were getting a divorce. And the settlement was that she would agree to accept Marvin's next album as payment for her divorce settlement. And the title of that album was called Hear My Dear. And that's an historical album to me because of the way Marvin approached it, the way he sang it, the way he did the entire thing. It was really an album about his meeting his wife that he was being divorced from and their relationship. And if your listening audience has not heard Hear My Dear, you need to get that album and listen to it. Listen to that album. It is an incredible piece of work. From Hear My Dear, Marvin went to London, and he had came back with enough material for an album, new album he wanted to put out, but he only had enough materials for 3 of the sides. In other words, in an album, if you have 2 records, it's side 1, side 2, side 3, side 4, or A, B, C, D. He only had enough for 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D. And we happened to be in the studio one day where Marvin and a drummer by the name of Bugsy Wilcox. Bugsy was on drums and Marvin was playing a piano, an electric piano, as a matter of fact, playing a bass line. So it was like a bass instrument and drums. And they were just the 2 of them in the studio recording, just playing around. And I liked what I heard, so I decided to record it. So when they finished doing whatever they were doing, the jam session they was doing, Marvin said to me, he said, "Art, I want you to start the recording machine. We want to record it. What do you think about it?" I said, "I already got it recorded, Marvin." And the title of that song at the time, it was called, Marvin called it Dancing Lady. It ended up being Got to Give It Up. From Dancing Lady to Got to Give It Up. But at any rate, when that started, that's how that song started. So what happened after Marvin realized that I'd record, he came in and listened to it and he put down some vocals on it, just nothing that he had written, nothing on paper, but just off the top of his head, he started just singing some words and fooling around with it. And at the end of the day, he said, "Okay, you can put that away, Art, I'm done with that." So when we came back to the studio, Marvin was working on another project. When he got tired of the project, he would ask me to bring out that tape that we had recorded with he and Bugsy Wilcox, and we started working on that. So at any rate, to cut to the chase, because it's a long story, but I'll make it succinct again. What I ended up doing without Marvin in the studio, adding other instruments to it because I liked it. Marvin had put it down and wouldn't touch it anymore. So whenever I was in the studio, I would bring the tape out and I was working with some other musicians. I would have them put different parts on for me. So I presented that to Marvin and told him that if he came back to the studio and finished this record, this would be his next #1 record, if he did that. And he agreed. So when he came back, we started working on it. He actually started writing the song as you hear it now, Got to Give It Up. Started writing the lyrics and we started putting it on. Now, this took a period of time. So when Marvin was not in the studio, I had a friend by the name of Johny McGee. Marvin told me he didn't like the guitar part that I put on with the group that I had. And he asked me if I knew of any other guitar players and musicians to put on. I said, well, I know a guy named Johny McGee, who is a guitar player for LTD, big vocal musical group then. So we brought Johnny in, and if you know about Got to Give It Up, in the second half of Got to Give It Up, there's a guitar that plays quite extensively. That's Johny McGee. We also brought in one of the funk brothers of Motown original funk brothers, Jack Ashford, to play a thing he called it the hotel sheet. And it was a plastic board that you could bend and move it around, and it would make a whipping sound. And that's what you hear in the record. Then I brought a saxophone player that played with the Commodores. I brought him in and put him on. So when you hear the sax part, the guitar parts, those are all people that I just brought in that I knew of to enhance the record. So now when we got it finished, we got all the parts that we wanted, and I got the record finished, I finished mixing it. Mixing it is really assembling all of the parts, putting it in their proper places on tape. And I took that to Marvin for him to hear on Christmas Day. And played it for me. He asked me, he said, which one do you like, Art? I told him I had 2 mixes. I told him, I like #1, but it doesn't make any difference to me. So he played the song. And Marvin says to me that, Art, I like this. I can't believe you did all this work by yourself. So he said, what I think I'll do is I'll tell Motown that you're going to be the producer of Got to Give It Up. I said, Marvin, I did not come up here to hustle you. It was Christmas Day. I said, I didn't come up here to hustle you. I just came up here to show you that this is your next #1 record. So he insisted upon me being the producer because of all of the work and the stuff that I put into it. Now, to make this thing work, we had 3.5 minutes of actual recording of the drums and the bass line that Marvin Gaye and Bugsy were playing, as I started the story about. To finish this, to make this work, I had to take I didn't have to, but I decided to take the last 20 bars, musically speaking, the last 20 bar phrases of the song that we had originally recorded, and I stretched that out to about 12 minutes, which meant we had to come back and put other instrumentation on and put Marvin on again. This 12 minutes gave us the fourth side that Marvin was missing. When you get a chance to, Marvin Gaye Live in London was the album that Got to Give It Up is in, for those who don't know. And if you've get this album or have possession of it, you will see Got to Give It Up is on one side all by itself, and that's how and why Marvin Gaye decided that I would be the producer, because I bailed him out. That was part of my meeting Marvin and where I ended up with Marvin doing Got to Give It Up.
And what's amazing about your story is you did so much as part of history, especially in the music world. There's other artists that you were able to work with as well. And I'm not sure if you want to get into that a little bit.
Oh, no, yeah, that my recording history at Motown became very extensive, Shemaiah. I worked with everyone that was big name at Motown. I can't think of anyone from Diana Ross, Marvin Gaye, the Jackson 5, the Temptations, Four Tops, Willie Hutch, Smokey Robinson. You name it, I've worked with them all. And I sort of had a working and a bond between the artists that I work with and also the great producers that were at Motown. You had Freddie Perrin, Franz Marzel, Dick Richards, and Berry Gordy. They were called the Corporation. The four names I just mentioned, they were the Corporation. They were the ones who got the first big records on the Jackson 5. Working with Willie Hutch on a couple of movie tracks, soundtracks that he did. And from there to, it was some of everybody. Anybody that Motown that had a name, I worked with them.
Yeah, Rick James, Teena Marie.
Teena Marie, yeah, Rick James and Teena Marie. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I got involved with Rick James after I Got to Give It Up on Marvin Gaye. Rick James had been hired by Motown. I found out Rick used to be in a group called the Minor Birds. It was a mixed group, white and black, early on in Rick's career, and Motown wanted to sign them. And for some reason they didn't. But later on in life, Rick came back to them. They decided to sign Rick again. And Iris Gordy, the niece of Berry Gordy, was the project manager for Rick James. And artists at record companies had people that were in charge of to make sure they got everything done on time. So Iris Gordy was the project manager for Rick James. And she called me in the studio one day and said, all right, I want you to work with a new artist we got, Rick James. And I want you to, take care of him and look out for him and make sure that he stays out of trouble. Jokingly, I said to Iris Gordy, I said, you want me to produce Rick James for free, do you? Just jokingly, I said that. And she said, you need to quit. I said, okay, all right. Just said I'll work with you. So at any rate, I began to work with Rick and found out that he was a very unique artist. Rick James was unlike the regular Motown artist. He had a different style, a unique way of writing songs and presenting them. At the time that I met Rick, right after doing Marvin, I was getting ready to leave Motown. I wanted to move to another area and do other things. And Rick asked me if I would produce with him his album. I told him I didn't want to. I said, I don't know, I'm getting ready to leave Motown. So he said, well, what if I offer you co-production and you be the co-producer with me? And I told him, I said, okay, I'll do that, but I'll do it under one stipulation. That is that you do what you do and you let me do what I do. In other words, Rick was your artist, the musicians. I don't play music, I don't read music, and I can't sing music. I know that's strange for your listener. I know you're going, what? But you see, our God has a unique way of giving gifts to his children. God gave me the gift of hearing. I can hear music. I can tell you about a note. I just can't sing it. And so Rick agreed, and that's how I did 2 albums with Rick. The first album was called Come Get It. The second album I did with Rick was called Bustin Out of L7. I did another album project with Rick where, here again, Rick was offered to produce Teena Marie, a young artist that Motown had already. Smokey had tried a lot of different artists to try to get a hit record on Teena Marie, and they were not successful. So they decided to give Rick James a shot at it. Well, what Rick did, Rick came to me and said, all right, I don't want to produce Teena Marie. By this time, Rick has had great success. I don't want to produce Teena Marie. Why don't you produce it? I said, I don't want to produce Teena Marie. I'm trying to get out of here. So at any rate, he said, all right, I tell you what if we do Teena Marie together? I said, okay, I'll do Teena Marie with you. So we did Teena Marie. Teena Marie's album that Rick and I did was called Wild and Peaceful. And all 3 of those albums were very successful for Motown. Rick became a big artist, and so did Teena Marie. They finally got Teena Marie off the ground. And it was because of the contribution that I made and my ability to work with the artists in a fashion that they were comfortable with and that I was comfortable using the knowledge and skills that I learned from the people that I'd studied under when I started off as a trainee at Motown. So, yep, Rick, Teena, yeah, that's right. You got it.
This interview is going to be one of my favorite interviews ever done.
Oh, well, it's. I tell you what, Shemaiah, it is all because of the great God that I serve, man, that I got to where I got to the area that I did and was able to do the things that I did. And I can never tell these stories without thanking God for giving me the opportunity and blessing me with the abilities to do what I did and not have the credentials, in other words, degrees and, you know, the musical degrees and all of that other stuff. I didn't have that, man. I just had something inside of me that I understood music and I could help put it together. So all thanks to God for that.
Once again, we are talking to Arthur Stewart, former Motown producer, right here on Iron Refocus Radio. Before we wrap up today, there's so many music creatives nowadays. I mean, everyone is trying to be in the music industry or trying to do it independently. For the young music creatives out there listening to this show, what words of wisdom would you like to give them? You know what,
music has evolved. From my mother's day, big bands, to my day, the Drifters, the Platters, and so forth, and then Motown. Now we're into black music is basically into what they call it rap. When rap first started, I was on board with it because I could understand it. And what I'm going to tell you is the same thing my mother told me at the time that my mother liked the big band era when we were growing up. The music we wanted to listen to was the Drifters, the Platters, all of those type of groups of that day. She didn't like that. I don't like rap. And the reason I don't like rap is because of the cursing and the foul-mouthed words that they use to express themselves, and I think that's totally unnecessary. Imagine a man by the name of Berry Gordy making millions and millions of dollars and putting out record after record after record and never having a curse word in it. Why would we gravitate to cursing and clowning and acting a fool to make money? Now, I've said all of that. I reserve the understanding in my mind to allow people to be and do what they want to do. It's just that I don't like rap. My children like it. My great-grandchildren like it. I just don't like it. So I'm not against rap. It's personal with me. I think that we can make money and we can survive in a world without going to the lowest common denominator to achieve that.
Well said. Before we let you go, I just want to first thank you because once again, this interview I feel like is a very special one. And I thank you for your time, telling your story, your way, and painting the picture to the audience, your whole career.
Shemai, I want to thank you for even inviting me to be on your show. It's a pleasure for me to speak to your audience and just simply to let them know that you can make music, good music, and make money without ever using a foul word. It's been proven time and time again. So I'll leave your audience with that. The young audience out there, I'm not against rap, but if you're going to rap, let me share something with you. My grandson is a rapper, and he's been having a problem with this, getting off the ground. And I gave him an idea. I said, listen to me. His name is, I just could use this abbreviation of his name is TJ. I said, TJ, listen to me. What you should do to break into rap, still rap, take some of the cussing out, slow it down, take some of it out, but here's how you want to present yourself to the world. Come out singing rap in a tuxedo. Don't ever grab your crotch. People know you got a crotch. You ain't got to grab it. You ain't got to do all of that. Come out and sing rap in a tuxedo and have the singers behind you in gowns. Take them out of thongs and put them in evening gowns and rap and see what happens. He's never tried that. But I think had he tried that, Shemaiah, he might have been very successful because it's different. One of the things I learned from all of the producers and all of the people that I work with, everyone had their own way of doing things. Norman Whitfield, Freddie Perrin, Smokey Robinson, they all produced different, they all heard different, but they all had one thing in common, and that was hit records. And they made hit records. So what I learned, gathered from them was not to imitate Norman, Smokey, Freddie, but to be your own, create your own music. Don't try to do what everybody else is doing. And when you listen to rap, they all sound the same. They have the same cadence, the same rhythmic pattern of expressing themselves. And to me, it's going to just die a slow death. And you won't have as many successful rap artists as you did when R&B was prevalent.
That is exclusive from Arthur Stewart himself. You mentioned about faith. I know that's important to you. What would you tell an individual listening to the show right now about faith and finding their own purpose?
It is very simple. There is a God. God is real. And all you have to do is to try. There's a scripture in Malachi where God says, try me now herewith and see that if I don't pull you out of blessing that you cannot be able to contain it all. And I did that about 30, 40 years ago, Shemaiah. I have never seen a hungry day. I've never seen a bad day. That doesn't mean I haven't had problems, but there was nothing compared to my life before God and my understanding that there is a God and serving Him and observing His rules and regulations as opposed to where I am now. My earlier life wasn't very glamorous. It was an extent if you want to live according to the word, but when you live according to God's way, Shemaiah, those who are listening, and follow His commandments, God has a way of making things so sweet for you, you will have no problems. Not meaning you won't have discouragements, but it won't be a problem. They'll be resolved. All of my problems get resolved. I don't have anything that happens to me that I can't resolve it. And if I can't fix it and God doesn't fix it, it wasn't meant to be. That's my story. For those who would like to know why I believe what I believe, is because I've tested God, because He said, prove me now. I did that, and it works for me. Now, if it doesn't work for you, that means because you're not doing it the way He said do it. I rest.
Once again, Arthur Stewart on Iron Refocus Radio, talking about his life as a former Motown producer. Uncle Arthur Stewart, man, I want to say thank you so much.
My pleasure, Shemaiah. My pleasure.
Thank you for being on the show. And once again, you're listening to Iron Refocus Radio. Like we say on every single show, keep God first, stay focused, and peace.
Thanks for listening to I Am Refocused Radio, brought to you by Documation. Documation is a full-service technology solutions company that provides IT, print, and software managed services. Headquartered in San Antonio, Documation has been serving customers across Texas for nearly 30 years. Visit Mation.com today. Hi, San Antonio. Need a barber? Visit our good friend Rico Rodriguez, the owner of Rockafellas Barbershop in San Antonio, Texas, 1733 Babcock Road, and book your appointment today by calling 210-782-5188.